Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Level Up Corner podcast. My name is Travis McCullum, and with me again are Sherry and Kyle. And today since we did our introduction episode where we talked about things that we like and stories of characters that we enjoyed and campaigns that we enjoyed, we figured we'd kind of step back a bit and talk about how to get somebody into D&D, how to get somebody into tabletop role-playing games, and for the uninitiated, what are some ways to get somebody interested who may or may not have ever played before. Now, this is something that I don't know because I've only played a few campaigns, but I'm going to defer over to the more experienced people, starting with Sherry. So, Sherry, when you started playing D&D, what were some of the things that got you into playing D&D, and then later on, how would you get somebody into D&D, you think?
Okay, well, I started playing D&D because my friends played D&D, and I don't really remember having any sort of interest in it at all until they basically just invited me to a session. And I was doing all sorts of stuff at my friend's house anyway, so when D&D came up, it was like, oh, okay, this will be easy for me to join. I'm pretty sure that they made my character for me. They didn't put any harsh requirements on me to be able to join, so they made it super easy. And like I kind of mentioned in the last episode, when I first started playing D&D, I was barely really even focusing. Like, me and my friends would just sort of mess around. But basically, they made it really easy for me. So if I was going to get somebody into D&D, I would make it really easy for them. Basically, you don't have to even make your character unless you really want to. I would hope that the whole group would be really friendly and welcoming, and I would just try to make them have a good time, I guess.
So you think accessibility is one of the biggest things to get people who are new to the community? Accessibility and ease of access would be what you would say.
Definitely. I think D&D can seem really overwhelming to someone from the outside because you need all of these source materials. Even just making your character can seem kind of scary if you've never done it before. So the easier that you can make it, the better. Even just finding a group can be hard. So if you already have a group that someone can join, that works too.
Well, and now for the expert, Kyle, what do you have to say on the subject?
Well, you have to break it down first. As a player or as a DM, how are you trying to get a person into the group?
Well, I think we should start off with the player side of things.
That's what I was thinking.
How we would get a new player, somebody who's never played D&D before, into playing a tabletop role-playing game.
Well, what Sherry said is kind of on point. Primarily, yes, you want to make it accessible, not a hassle. And when they're bored, just like, hey, this is an option I've been doing. You want to try it? It's like, I guess I might as well. I don't have a choice on that. Like, I'm kind of bored anyway, so why not? And that's the best time to catch them if you get the drift on that. But as for making sure your preparation is good, you need to have a whole thing set to the person who's drawn in. It's just like, yeah, sure, why not? And that's how you want it to seem. But really, you start the Mission Impossible music in your head as you start to plan this. Like, all right, how do I get this person in? How do I get it so that this person is actually going to like what I personally love? And you can't just say, hey, Jim, want to come play this game? All right, and then send them in and then give them a random character sheet. It never works out like that. At least if you want the player to enjoy D&D and stay. As a player, you first have to make sure it's okay with your DM. Your DM needs to be on board. If they don't know that you're that you're going to bring in a new player, then it's a yada. Let me prep and. Who was that? Why are they? What's going on? And then they're not going to get the attention they need and deserve. So you first make sure it's okay with your DM that they're on board. Second, you have to make sure the new players is going to be welcomed by the other players at your table. If you're there and Jimmy the crack addict is kind of in the corner and you've just been dealing with him, well, you want to make sure that you're introducing them into a good group. I've seen people try to introduce players into D&D when they just bring them to their current table. And they didn't consider the company that they kept. And then they have Jimmy the crack addict and Joe the blower out there who's blowing 20 different types of e-cigs in the people's face like, hey man, guess what flavor that is? Close, it's not watermelon, it's raspberry. You gotta make sure that your crowd is actually going to be appeasing to this person that you've brought in. That's the second part. And the third is to make sure that that crowd is actually okay with a new person coming in and that they'll actually help them and not just say, all right, we're in combat. I'm going to do this. And then when it's the new person, they're like, I don't know what to do. Really? You're only starting as a level 5 character. You should know everything by now. Did you not read this book right here? I mean, I didn't need to read this one, but I just picked up a book and I read it because I like to read everything D&D. You should have that as well to a new person and try to gatekeep or anything like that. You need to make sure that your party is actually going to be welcoming and accommodating to that player. Just like, hey, if he or she needs help, make sure that there's someone next to them who is willing to help them. Because the DM is overwhelmed with everything. It's not always their job to babysit everyone. I mean, yes, we are pretty much babysitters, but we can't just be like, hey, alright, so this is how you roll, this is how you do this stuff, this is how you prep for your turn. We're like, no, alright, combat, this, alright, let's go. Oh crap, my notes are all gone. Yes, that was a thing. That was totally a thing in my notes. So you have all this going on in the DM, and you can't expect the DM themselves to just be on top of it. You need someone to help that player and accommodate them. Because a lot of times, if that player doesn't have someone to guide them or multiple people, then they'll just get lost, kind of bored, and look for their phone, because I don't even know what's going on and no one's helping me. So you need to have people there to help them. Now, that's just the planning phase with your group. In order to get the player to come to your table, you need to present a situation where it seems serendipitous, but is actually somewhat planned, usually. Because you don't just say, hey everyone, let's have D&D on this day, and everyone just goes, yeah, we'll all come and we'll all show up. No, this needs to be a planned thing. D&D is a planned event because it affects multiple people's lives. So, if you get a new person, or you really want a new person to enjoy D&D to its fullest, it could seem like it's not that big of a deal, but overall you should kind of have a day and a day planned to have this session and just bring them in if you can. That's ideal. If you have to plan a session in the future, then it's more likely that the new player will say, yeah, it sounded cool at the time, but that's really nerdy, and I'm not into dice. I'm not a gambler myself, and they might start
How much is this dropping off effect when you're playing, not just as a player, but as a DM as well? Because I've seen in campaigns I've been a part of where we start with like 7 people and end up with 3. So, it does happen. Mm-hmm. And what do you think? Do you think part of it is just they're not interested? That's what'll cause them to want to step away or do something different? Or what do you think are some of the causes for people wanting to drop off of playing?
See, retention is the second part of this. The key point as to why I was going into so much detail is because if you miss those first steps, of course someone's going to drop off. If they're just thrown into this thing and they don't have someone there to help guide them, then of course they're going to be thrown. And then of course they're not going to stay. If they don't feel welcome, of course they're not going to stay. That's why I need to do all this pre-prep and planning. But into that second part, if you've done all of those, then you should retain the new players much more easily. You're not putting them in with a bad group, which is a lot of it. It's that there could be group issues that happen. There could be real life issues that happen for a new player that comes in, though, specifically, since we're talking about bringing in new players. It's that tentative reluctance where they're just, I don't know, actually. It sounded good yesterday, but today, I don't know. And then the next day, the longer you wait after giving that offer and when you try to set up this whole session is when there's a much higher likelihood of them dropping off. But if you get everything set and you pay attention to this person, you give them the attention they deserve, not coddling them. Just all right. So this is a D6. It has 6 sides. When it says D6, roll a D6 because it has 6 sides, and this one pit means a 1, and this 2. I've seen people do that as well, just over coddling. It's making sure that they are attended to, but not overwhelmed. And that's the other key factor in retention, is that they need to be able to, when everyone is on board, and it's easier to facilitate this, but they need to be able to ease themselves in, and preferably, for real retention, give them a moment to shine. Give them something that they do. It could be something that's not even planned. It could be something that they enjoy in real life. Let's say someone likes sewing. You could incorporate that into it to where they go into a tailor shop and they could say, like, wait, that's not correct. And then they're able to point something out, or they're able to implement or just insert into the game their own real life experience and make them feel important, because they need to experience what makes D&D amazing, is that you have an impact on the story. They shouldn't be told that you can do anything, because that's just overwhelming, but let them experience it, a taste of it, and that causes people to want to stay and play again.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. In one of my first games, not my very first one, because like I said, I was hardly there, but actually the first game even I played, Kyle. Do you remember that? I'm sure you do. Yep. All those years ago. One of the reasons why I loved it so much was because the DM, I was playing, it was either a druid or a cleric, I don't remember now, but I had some kind of incredible encounter with my god. And I just thought, my gosh, here I am, just a regular player, and I'm actually meeting and talking to my god, and they're giving me this fantastic item, and it was so incredibly memorable, and I felt special, because nobody else was getting special treatment. It was just me, or at least, in my head I thought that was the case, but it made me addicted, and I was so excited to come to sessions after that, because I wanted to see what else was going to happen, and I just felt so cool. So, yeah, I'd say definitely make them feel as special as you can.
Yeah, I think it is that making them feel special, because like we talked about last week with some of the stories with the characters that we had, the little moments, the little stories, whether it's orphans or running from townsfolk or what have you, there's some sort of story there that makes them interested and invested in what's going on. And even if you're somebody not experienced like myself, having that sense of feeling special, well, for me at least, kept me along and kept me wanting to be part of the game. And I think that is something that can help keep the people interested while they're playing as well. And, what's interesting about that, though, is, you get people into playing D&D. And so, say you got them in the game, you got them going, but then you start noticing some things are off. And this kind of leads into our second/third point that will kind of, knowing Kyle, it'll kind of ebb and flow as the conversation goes on. But one thing, and didn't you even write an article about this? Or I'm pretty sure I remember you writing an article about this on the website.
Which thing specifically?
Red flags.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We've written a lot of articles, so.
Exactly. There's been a lot of articles that you can find over at thelevelupcorner.com, which is the website that this is all coming from. But what's really interesting is you can get a lot of new people into playing D&D, whether it's Forge or Roll20 or Start Playing or wherever. Issue is sometimes, though, is that some players can be toxic, and you'll start to notice some red flags. And, when we were coming up with topic ideas, this is one that there was a lot to talk about with. So
this could make it really hard for new players to join too.
Yeah, it makes it really hard. Yeah, it makes it really hard when it's not a I mean, Kyle went on a story about, like being in person and being with that group. And, sometimes you'll have issues there with, a certain kind of vibe that you're getting. And that can happen online, too. There can be vibes that just aren't really working. The issue, however, is that sometimes it goes deeper than that. Sometimes it's in how they play as well. And, Kyle, I will defer to you since you wrote an entire article on this.
Yeah, it's been so long. I'm trying to look at the red flags article, and I'm getting a whole bunch of other things like how to deal with problem players in D&D, or
well, I mean that can count too. I mean that's the thing.
Bad
It's
DMs
not
and
just.
top 5 tells.
I mean, we can go into all of that here. We have plenty of time.
If you let Kyle talk first, he's going to talk for 30 minutes. So.
All right. Well, then
I don't know.
Sherry,
Maybe we better cap him off.
Yeah, well, in that case, Sherry, I'll let you start off with some of your red flags and problematic things that you've noticed, and things that tend to bug you.
Okay, are we talking like just red flags in general, or are we talking red flags when you're trying to introduce that new person into your group?
Either really work, I think, for the sake of the episode, because this is a topic that we could always go back to another time. I think we should start off with the new player side of things and then go from there. So,
yes.
What are some red flags you notice with new players?
Well, it's not with the new players themselves, but more, if you're trying to bring in a new person, what not to do, that might be a red flag for them.
Yeah.
Don't be too intense. Like, I know you might love D&D and it might be your whole life, but please just calm it down a little bit. You do not have to have everyone at the table dressing up in their costumes and doing the funny voices and all that stuff on the first session, okay? That would scare me off, and I've been playing D&D for 10 years, so don't do that with a new player unless you know that they love roleplay. Same sort of thing goes for, like, power gaming. Don't be a super intense power gamer around a new person who is learning the rules and is probably going to be messing up a lot and really does not need to be thinking about all that. I mean, there's already enough math in D&D. You don't need to be scaring them off with optimization and that sort of thing. You agree with me, Kyle?
Oh yeah, power gaming is a big
over
turn
there.
off for new players.
Oh, and I agree completely with it too, because I've been playing for a year and a half, and there's a lot of times still where even after playing for as long as I have that, I'll be like, wait a second, how does this work? Because I don't understand this. So, wait, I haven't had to do this before, so what?
I will amend that statement and say that it is the case for most players. For some people, especially if they like normally power gaming, if they like end game content in MMOs, if they like tabletops like Warhammer or something, go into full optimization. Be like,
yeah, sure. If that's their thing,
if they're weird, but yeah, like me.
Yeah, no. If they love optimization and min maxing things, that's fine. I mean, every player's different. But if you have somebody who's never played before and it's just like, hey, I'm starting a group on Roll20 or Start Playing or through an independent DM, we're starting this campaign and we're going to do this. All right, so we're going to start playing, and here's this character, and this character, and your character, and then there's this guy over here who's min-maxing the hell out of everything and just trying to, like, power everything and just essentially be the protagonist and the only protagonist and make everything about themselves and make the entire game focused around them instead of around the group.
Oh, yeah. That's a big red flag.
Mm-hmm.
That's a massive one. I mean, I don't have a lot of red flags because I haven't noticed many outside of.
You're lucky.
Well, granted, I've only ever really played 3 or 4 campaigns, and the only things that have ever bugged me are people not consistently showing up to play.
Right,
which,
and not paying attention or not even caring.
I mean, granted, and that can be different for everybody. Some people love to take notes, some people don't take a lot of notes. Most of the time, if in Kyle's sessions, he'll say, all right, so it's time to do a recap of previous events, so we're going to do a recap and talk about that. Some people have all of their notes and are like, all right, here's my rundown of everything that happened. And then if you ask me to do it, half of the time I'll be like, okay, well, I think this happened, and this happened. It's a simplified version of it, but, it's like, these are the main bullet points. It's different for everybody. I'm a bullet point person. Some people are wanting to write down every sentence. It's different.
Yeah, that's all good and fine, but you should still have, some idea of what is going on. If you're just in
yeah.
another world not paying attention, I mean, why are you here?
Now we're getting into my pet peeves a little bit.
No, I mean, if you're only paying attention
All
to
right.
combat, I mean, if you're only paying attention to combat and you're not paying attention to anything else, and you're on Netflix, or you're playing Final Fantasy 14 or playing another game on Steam or doing something else while you're doing it, and you only chime in or you only pay attention when there's combat going on, and otherwise you're silent the entire time, then yeah, that can be a bit of a downer because it's a group event, it's a group thing, and if you're not really contributing to the group, there's a difference between not contributing to the group because you're shy or you're an introvert or you're not really comfortable yet, and that can come with time, and then not contributing because you don't care.
Now, are we going into pet peeves? This is more of a pet peeve problem that happens, or are we going into problem players? Because there's
it gets kind of messy, and that's okay.
And that's what I was saying before, Kyle, is that this kind of topic can ebb and flow.
True.
Somebody's red flag can be somebody else's pet peeve, and somebody else's pet peeve it varies. I mean, some things are bigger than others. Like for me, that's kind of my only real one that I have is people not showing up, not contributing, or just only paying attention to one aspect of it and just not really caring. That's my only thing. That's my real only issue. Is it a red flag? Is it a pet peeve? It's more of the latter, but there can be a bit of the former there too, depending on the player and how they are. So, but no, I mean, it's hard when you have a new player and it can kind of deter them when somebody just wants to make.
Oh, true. Again, that's the idea with the group and the vibe that you have. It doesn't always have to be like yeah, bro, I'm into that stuff, or into whatever else. You don't need to just have those people. It could be like in the pushy person, or just a player who won't mesh well with this individual. So that's something to keep in mind when you're introducing a person, is to make sure that everyone here is okay or will be viewed positively by that other individual who you're bringing in. Because if you have Joey the power gamer over there being like, hey, I'm level 3, I'm able to do 70 damage one round reliably every time under any circumstance and make it happen. It's just like, whoa, dude. Chill. The intensity you have, like, I'm glad that you're passionate, but that's a little bit intense. Why are you still trying to breathe on my shoulder? Like, you get those people who are far too into it, or again, just make sure that your group is going to mesh well, vibe with your new players, or that they will be welcomed and comforted. And again, paying attention is another huge part, because if your group's disinterested, like, oh man, gotta wait for this, then why would that new player be interested?
Oh yeah, or if everyone's on their phones when the new player comes.
Yeah.
And they're like on their phones the whole session and they're not paying attention, that does not give off a very good impression at all.
And then there is also the giant elephant in the room, which is people who have made a career out of playing D&D. And I'm not talking Kyle. I'm not talking about professional DMs that you start playing. I'm talking about people who have had mainstream success. Whether it's on,
and I'm expecting to be like that. The Matt Mercer effect.
Okay, yeah.
I was going to jump into that. It's not just Matt Mercer, though. I mean, you can go, like, Critical Role is obviously the biggest one out of there.
Yeah, it's more known as the Matt Mercer effect, to where people are like, hey, why isn't this what I see in the movies? It's kind of like that whole statement that people said, of just like, the most extreme example would be like, oh, well, porn obviously isn't sex because that's just acting. That's like ridiculous personifications of it rather than what it actually is.
Well, they're also professional voice actors too, and
that's what I'm saying with Critical Role in them, is that it's such a high quality performance where you have a very high quality, been here for years, professional DM, professional voice actors, professional actors just in general, and you're comparing yourself to that. That's why I brought in the previous.
You're comparing the minimal side of it, where you have somebody who is just a person on Twitch, or just a person who is just running a 3-person group off of Forge, and they'll put all the time and the effort into creating the maps and creating the story and everything, but obviously it's not going to look like a Critical Role. It's not going to have some of the, I don't really want to bring up Arcadium, but like it won't have some of the some of the aspects of the bigger creators and the bigger people out there.
And for bringing people into this is more as if you and your group of friends are going to start D&D. Like, not if you're bringing them into an already existing group or an experienced DM with experienced players. But if you're just starting a new group and you're all like, hey man, D&D looks awesome. I want to be a part of that. If you do so, be ready for everything to suck. Because your DM is not going to know what's happening. They won't know half the rules they think they do. And the other half is just a black void. The players will be there and just like, I don't know what to do. And they won't contribute to the... Oh, yes?
Are you saying bringing a new person into DM now?
Well,
because you should never do that.
No. It's like he's from what we were talking about in our news section of this is that if you guys are starting a D&D group, if you're starting a D&D group, someone has to DM. And if none of you have played D&D before, one of you still has to DM.
Right, or you could hire someone while you learn the game.
Yeah, you can hire somebody.
Yes. And then
it would,
on your own. Yeah.
It would be the smartest thing to hire somebody and then ask for advice because ultimately if you're going to be running a group, the time and effort it takes into the campaign and to creating everything, it's not easy.
No, it's overwhelming.
It takes time.
I could not even imagine like being a completely new player trying to DM. That just seems like a disaster waiting to happen.
No, it's much better.
I can tell you from experience it is.
Well, you were 10 when you started, so.
But it is much better to hire somebody. So it's better to hire somebody and then ask for advice and help as you go along. But when you have those expectations from the mainstream side of things, it can make things a bit hard.
Well, to play devil's advocate, though, I think the presence that Dungeons & Dragons has through social media would make it a lot more interesting for more people. I think it would actually get new players in more often because they'll see it online and they'll see the Matt Mercer episodes and all these different people who are playing D&D, and that could actually get them into it. So
we saw a huge surge of players. I mean, I'm pretty sure Roll20 definitely boomed after Critical Role started really picking up success.
Critical Role was huge.
It is.
It is, but it was huge for like getting people into D&D, and it still brings in new people all the time. But yes, you are correct that it has brought in a lot of new players and people.
No, and there's nothing wrong.
Oh, go on.
No, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with Critical Role, but the expectations that you have for a highly polished game and a highly polished presentation can sometimes, it's hard when you're a DM and you have these new players come in and they're expecting something, and they're expecting one thing and they get another thing and then they end up dropping off, and it can be hard.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I think in our society, to some extent, we just have to learn to subvert our expectations. I mean, we see the movies, we see television shows, we know that that's not real life. But hopefully if a player is old enough, mature enough, they can understand that and not have unrealistic expectations just because they've watched Critical Role or something like it. But maybe I'm expecting too much.
Well, true to a point, but I would also say that we have lower attention spans, and sometimes, especially in combat, when people aren't experienced, it can drag. Whether it's the DM or the players, it can drag, and that can also cause some other problems too. So, there's...
Yeah, well, combat is a whole nother topic for a whole nother time. I would say. We could talk about that for hours.
Oh yeah, we definitely could, and I have many tricks on how to make it much better than what it sometimes turns into. But yes, attention for new players and them coming in with realistic expectations of what they're actually going to play, rather than the glorified personification of what make-believe professional fantasy they believe they're getting into, and it's like that's not.
Yeah, that's a concern. You just tell them up front, when they join, like, hey, we're obviously not voice actors. Our DM is not some famous guy. So, we're here to have a good time, but this isn't going to be like what you see on Critical Role or something.
Yeah, it all depends also if they are why they are playing. Now we're getting into the why of having a player join. Before it was the idea of let's just grab a person and get them in and be like, hey, you want to play D&D? What's D&D? Let me show you, my friend. But
that I think would be much harder.
Well, that's what we were more so going into in the first part of it. For this part, if they have seen D&D, like Critical Role or some of those other shows, and are like, hey, I've seen these really cool shows, and I want to get into D&D, then you need to specify it. But if they haven't seen it, and you're just trying to get them in slowly, then, just...
So now you're talking about getting in a person who maybe... It obviously isn't into D&D, isn't into...
I'm saying that was our first portion of it. That was our first portion of it. Now
if you're trying to get someone to join who is just not even into fantasy or gaming at all, good luck.
Yeah,
that would be really hard.
Yeah, I'm not saying for that. I'm just saying the first part of it was about that portion of getting people in who haven't seen Critical Role and that other stuff, and now we're just discussing people coming in from that idea of watching D&D and Critical Role, and it is good to know where that person is coming from with their knowledge of D&D. Like, you'll want to ask a question before you say, hey, you want to play, just hey, have you ever heard of D&D or anything else? And that should also temper your approach and make sure it's changed a little bit, because if they haven't seen Critical Role or anything like it, sure, just say it'll be a fun time. And if they have, make sure that they're coming in with realistic expectations.
Yeah, the realistic expectations can be really important because, it can turn some people off. There are some people who will only play 1 or 2 sessions because they just don't really feel like the vibe fit what they felt like they were getting themselves into. Or they run into incredibly toxic players. It's something that happens. And, it can really be tedious sometimes when you have people that do take over and do all these things that are really annoying. And, I talked about some of my annoyances. Kyle, you have your annoyances. If you wanted to elaborate further on any of them, I know that we kind of been flowing back and forth a bit, but
yeah.
So we're going to talk about pet peeves?
We're going to talk about pet peeves now.
Okay,
because, we okay, because we've been
just to do a throwback from what you said, the flags were on how to deal with problem players in D&D. It does have a section of, red flags, so... But, you want to talk about...
What does? The article?
Yes, the article. Level Up Corner.
Oh, right.
Has how to deal with problem players in D&D, and underneath, identifying a problem player is some red flags are, and then it goes through.
Well, and for the people watching this, for the people watching this on YouTube, we'll put a link down below to the article.
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit on the older side, but it's still worth reading. But that's the thing is, we've talked about how to get people into playing D&D, and we've talked about kind of the expectations versus reality and things like that. But pet peeves are a thing, and everyone's got some. I pretty much have summed up mine already throughout this kind of weaving web that we have, but I know you guys talked about having some yourselves, so whichever one of you wants to start first, go right ahead.
What's happening? What's happening?
Kyle, pay attention.
Exactly. That is the biggest pet peeve I have, because there are so many things that stem from it. But this also goes again into that idea of when you bring a new player and you don't want anyone to do this. But the idea of when someone says, "Oh, what's happening? What's happening?" is the most annoying, disrespectful thing you can do, because that shows, one, I haven't even been paying attention, obviously. 2, no one's time is as valuable to me as my own. And 3, this game is only worth it if the things that I deem are necessary to pay attention to are here. Or 4 is that the game seriously has some fundamental issues with flow, and you will need to work on them as much as you can to make this more interesting. But usually 4 does happen, but usually it's a 1 of 3, and it's a problem with that person. It's just what's happening is the absolute worst. And I have found, tying it back in earlier when you guys were talking about the recap, that when I give players the statements, especially upon the second session and so forth, that they will be doing recaps, players pay attention a bit more. There's less of the what's happening because, like, oh man, what if I'm called on the recap? Oh man, I need to know what's going on. Unless it's a group of hopeless people who are just like, oh, we're gonna kill everyone. So
I had a great idea.
Huh.
So, as a teacher, I know that a great way to get your students to pay attention is by quizzing them. So, you should randomly call on people at the beginning to give the recap. And I bet you everyone's going to start taking notes. They're going to start actually paying attention. It'll be great. Don't let someone just volunteer. Like, actually call on them. It'll freak them out.
That's a good idea. Most groups, though, get to the point where they're just like, I'm not going to recap every time, guys. Come on. All right, we're going to make a system. Tim, you're recapping today. And they're like,
nice.
Oh, is it my turn? And no one remembers. No one remembers when it's their turn. So it's always a quiz. It's always wait, am I on the rotation? Yeah, you knew like 3 weeks ago when we put you on the schedule. Oh, man. Let me check my notes because they never
Oh, but you took notes. That's an improvement.
Yes.
Or at least they took notes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and this gets them to take notes because they never are organized. Players are the most disorganized creatures I've ever seen. So this causes them to take more notes and do more work because they are unable to maintain a basic schedule with each of them. So it's hilarious. I don't have to do much except say, hey, do a recap, and that has made player engagement so much better.
Yeah, and also you've probably forgotten some of the stuff that happened, so it's really nice when the players can recap it for you, right, Kyle?
It is, and it's also nice when I hear what the players were really interested in. So, for example, if I think there was a plot point that was really cool that happened, they're just like, oh yeah, that happened? Yeah, there was a strange guy. All right, let's leave on. Just like, all right, either A, they didn't pick up on it, or B, it wasn't as cool as I thought it was. So that's a nice way of getting feedback as well as a DM. And yeah, that's what I do to solve a little bit of the what's happening. But stemming from that, there's 2 more pet peeves that are directly related to it. Actually, all mine kind of.
Well, let's take turns now.
Oh,
it's not just
Fine.
Come on, Kyle. I know you're used to being the star, but we're here too.
No, I know you're used to being the DM, but at the same time, I feel like since I can't really contribute much to it because I've already expressed all of my.
We make the story together in a game of D&D. The DMs are
I'm just saying from a moderating standpoint, I feel like it would be better to go back and forth. So Sherry, let's go with one of yours next.
Okay, well this is both a pet peeve and a red flag. Rules lawyering. So when you have that person who all they want to do is argue with the DM's decisions, and they're going to be getting out the book and they're going to be reading something that, oh, DM, you did this wrong because of this rule here. It's annoying. Just stop it. I don't care if the DM's wrong. Just shut up. And maybe talk to them about it after the game respectfully, but seriously.
Well, so
don't be so argumentative.
You're addressing both crowds of rule slayers. There's good and bad. We actually have an article on this on Level Up.
There's a way to do it respectfully, but I don't think being super argumentative in the middle of a game and making a scene is polite.
Fair.
And it also is going to chase away new players. Because
If it interrupts
someone like that.
Yeah, if it interrupts the flow of the game, and it interrupts the flow of the story, or it interrupts the flow of combat, because there are times where combat can just go by really quick because people know what they're doing. They know they've kind of planned ahead. And then next thing you know, you're back to your turn, back to their turn, back to your turn, back to their... And it can go by really quickly. But there are times where people will go... It's usually, on the bad side of things, it's usually if they aren't getting their way. If they aren't getting things exactly the way they want it to be done... Then you run into the issue of people going, well, my blank 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 should have worked here because I did this and I did that.
So before we go
Mhm.
further, there are
Exactly.
two types of rules lawyers. There is the rules
Are you
lawyer.
gonna write an article about it?
I already have, actually. There is,
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
yeah, there is the first type of rules lawyer, which is, hey, there are rules that we all abide by. I'd like to know what I can do. Let's all stay within the parameters of the rules. Fair
Okay.
enough. This applies to the DM and the players. Sometimes they can be a bit more aggressive, and yes, the approach is important, as you stated, Sherry, but that is the first type. The good type, the one that keeps everyone honest, including themselves, who will penalize themselves. The second is the how much can I force power gaming through veiled legality, but really my way to be, in control of the
Yeah,
entire
let's try to
session.
break the game within the boundaries of the rules. So
Mhm.
really, I'm just dominating the DM at this point. And
Yeah,
completely
and-
ruining everything.
Yeah, and those are the two rules layers, and you actually do bring up a good statement as you're actually addressing them both. It's the presentation of how to do this and how it's handled as well. Like, as a DM, you have to know how to handle when you're wrong, because yeah, we do make mistakes. That's for sure. Even
Yeah,
after like 20
especially
years.
you, Kyle.
Well, I mean, everybody's human. At the end of the day, there's still a human DMing the game. So
Mhm.
DMs can make mistakes. Players can make mistakes. Everyone is capable of making mistakes because we're all fallible humans. It's
Like
not
that
some
Hannah
AI.
Montana song.
Oh, it's not some. It's not some AI program yet that's doing DMing and doing automated DMing. So,
Not yet.
I mean, not yet. It
We're
may
getting
reach
there.
that point. It
I'll
may
give
reach
it-
that point.
Give it like 10 or 20 years.
I mean, it may reach that point at some point.
I think
but
Blaine
I
on
mean,
YouTube actually has there's a D&D simulator where him and Joe Cat I think played it, and it was hilarious. Not like for the
That's scary.
Oh, it was scary. It was like for the first part, it was like, what do you want to be, human or elf? Let's be a human. What is your profession? I'm a baker. All right, as you wake up on your farm, your wife is in front. Like, wait, what? All right, what do you
No,
say to your
I
wife?
mean-
Hello, she is dead.
Mhm.
Continue.
Oh,
these-
actually, I think I've seen stuff like this.
I mean, these things will happen eventually because everything will eventually happen, and depending on how you look at things. But realistically, though, like you said, it and kind of how what I brought up earlier is that if it breaks up the flow and the presentation of things, then it can really kind of hinder the game and make people not want to come back. As if somebody is like, my shield of faith isn't working right now. Why isn't it working right now? I cast it 2 turns ago, and yet it's not doing this, and da-da-da.
And that's fair to ask some of those questions. Like, does
No,
Shield
and
of
it-
Faith protect me from the fireball? It's like, no, it doesn't. Why not? Because it gives you +2 AC. And then you ask, is this an attack roll? It's like, no, it's dexterity save. Is dexterity save AC? And then you try to make the players think of it more. But yeah, it's sometimes it's good to ask those questions.
Yeah,
No,
that's
no,
more
it's-
clarification, though.
Yeah, no, it's fine to ask questions. It's a different thing when you're not getting your way and you're throwing, essentially,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, you're throwing a hissy fit because you thought you did something, but you didn't. And then,
Mhm.
it can cause that, so...
Oh, I hate that too. I didn't even think of that. Gaslighting the DM.
Oh,
Yeah, gaslighting...
wow.
I've seen that
Like,
so much in my time.
Yeah, I have too. And I mean, I'm not even a DM, but I've seen it just from the player side. I mean, gaslighting is a big issue in general, regardless of the situation. I mean, just look at pretty much any
Yeah, just
facet.
don't do it.
Yeah,
It's not nice.
look at any facet of society, and gaslighting's a thing. But it is something that happens. I've noticed. I won't say a lot, but in my experiences, it's happened enough where it makes me kind of look a bit sideways when I see it happen.
Oh, it happens a lot in D&D. I'm not even gonna sidestep this. As players feel like, obviously you want to win, but this happens not to every player, of course, but more so than it should in D&D, to where when the DM, who's running a bunch of things, is taking care of a lot of other stuff, it asks, like, all right, what's your AC? Because I didn't have this written down. And then you slowly adjust it, or you roll a die and then you scoop it up really quick, or just hide it from the DM and just say, like, no, I obviously did that roll. Or you try to gaslight what happened 3 rounds ago because you don't have a chat log since it's in person and you actually trust people like an idiot. But Yeah.
Blatant cheating, trying to get away with it.
I have had some horror
Man.
stories on cheating.
Well, and I mean cheating can be its whole other thing.
Oh
at
yeah,
some
that'll
point,
be a different
because,
podcast.
Definitely
I have
a red
whole
flag.
stories.
I mean, yeah, we can get into the cheating side of things. Like, I've literally, it's kind of a running joke between Kyle and myself that I have either really good luck or really bad luck. There's like no in between. And a lot of times when I'm playing games, it tends to roll on the good side. So, like, when I roll characters, like, it'll be like really high, and I'll like show Kyle. It's like here's literally the clip of me doing this, and it's like this is what showed up. It's like there's nothing under a 10 here. I'm sorry, I can't be a.
It's gotten to the point I expect you to roll 20 on 3d6s, like just naturally. It's just.
I mean, it depends, but there are people who will try to milk that, and that's something that will happen. It's like, no, I got a 17 on that, or no, I got a 16. No, like I got a plus 12 to this. See,
We'll save this for cheating because I have you and my brother in one category versus the people who actually cheat. That's
yeah. People who are insanely lucky versus people who try to milk the system and gaslight. No, and that is, I mean, it is a massive issue, though, that I've seen just from my year and a half of playing, is people trying to take advantage of the DM when, well, it's,
especially
it doesn't help
it.
Especially if you know the DM, but it's just not something that really should, it's not something that should happen, but, I mean, within that, it's just, it's in bad taste because it just takes everybody out of the game. It takes everybody out of the game. Yeah. Yeah, it's obviously
disrespectful
rude, but
to every other player who's playing legitimately. I mean, I'm sorry that the dice doesn't always roll above a 10 for you. It's the same for everyone else.
It also minimizes everyone else's accomplishments. Like, usually those people are already power gaming, so they already have a more powerful character. And then when you do that, it just makes other players who have normal characters and are trying to play the game normally be like, wow, why am I here? I'm just some sidekick, and it just like, hey, can I spit shine your shoes, sir? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me be the rug that you can step on. It's like I don't want to feel that. No one does.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think that player has some major insecurities, and I don't really like them bringing that to the table.
Well,
I mean, I'm there to have a good time, not deal with other people's problems. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it can be a real issue, and it's something that, it gets brought up, but I don't think it gets brought up enough. And, I mean, it can definitely be a pet peeve. I mean, I didn't even think about it, but now that I'm sitting here, yeah, it's a definite pet peeve.
Oh, yeah, and it's an even more of a pet peeve when the other players are all really silent about it and no one wants to deal with it.
Ugh.
Because of the conflict.
Well, then, I mean, isn't there something called the pedestrian effect where, like, nobody wants to be that one person?
Bystander effect.
No one wants to.
Something also very important to point out, as I just had in my article that I've been referencing for the what was it? How to deal with problem players in D&D. It states right in the beginning, identifying a problem player. Most dungeon masters do not identify problem players well. That's because we're dealing with so many other things. All the other players can see it, and players just don't stick up. Another pet peeve is when they expect the DM to be perfect, but they themselves are allowed to be extremely incompetent. Like to the point of, hey, DM.
Yeah.
I see that you screwed up on this plot point here because they're not connecting as neatly as I desire. And then the next round, hey, how does my sneak attack work? You're level 17 rogue! Come on!
Yes, well, Kyle, this is a problem with people in general. We're quick to judge others and see faults in others, but when it comes to ourselves, we have a hard time identifying it.
Yeah, or just not knowing what to do on your turn. That's another part that's also really annoying, where it's just like,
yeah,
hey, DM.
Maybe you weren't paying attention.
Exactly, that's another part of it. But sometimes it's just, especially you spellcasters, could cast a fireball, but
we've all done
cast fly, and then Jimmy the rogue could go up there and he's not within
This
range.
just sounds like me now. I know I do this for sure.
I mean, admittedly,
I'm not
if
done
you
yet.
don't,
How about and the game can't continue on, but yeah, keep going.
well, no, admittedly, if you don't know what you're doing, like right now, I'm playing a bard and I have no idea what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah,
So,
well, you have an
it's- well,
excuse of I came in at like level 9 and we're level 10. Like, that's better.
It's also hard as a spellcaster when suddenly it's your turn and everything has changed. So it's like, oh well, shoot! Now I actually do have to take a sec to think about it.
This is
well,
why
and
I
especially
say...
if you're a support character too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, this is also why I say fighters are the best leaders, because fighters are like, hey, or at least in first edition especially, like, what are your abilities? Whack. Alright, what else can I do? Let's see what everyone else is doing. This is what a wizard and a spellcaster does.
Making plan. Yeah, pretty much.
Alright.
For those of you who are not watching the video, Kyle's looking at his book.
Alright.
But no, that's
I'm
the
ready.
thing though.
Oh, it's changed. One moment. 5 minutes later.
Well, yeah, no. If they take an inordinate amount of time, I think at a certain point the DM should step in and be like,
Yes.
like, hey, like not tell them what to do on their turn, but hey, if you have any questions about anything, or if you're unsure about what something will do, like it's only within the last like 2 months or so that I've been able to figure out how to actually play a bard, because it's like, oh, this is a support character, and maybe if I raise everybody's AC during this boss fight, maybe that would be beneficial. Wait, how much bardic inspiration do I have? Like, how many have I done of this? Or how many? When's the last time we had a long rest? But that's the thing, is when you're playing a support class, you have to kind of think. You gotta kind of play chess when others are playing checkers. Is you gotta think.
Oh
a couple
yeah,
turns
it's so
ahead.
much harder. And it does take more time to plan your turns.
So, I mean, I can see how it would be frustrating if you just sit there for 5 minutes just hemming and hawing, flipping a book, not knowing what to do. But at the same time...
And that's why I say I love like leader fighters, because they're just like, hey, what can I do? Nothing. All right. And then they help everyone else be like, wizard, fireball here. And they're just like, well, I could. It's like, no, do this now. It's like, all right. They hit it. And they blow up the ceiling because the ceiling has some ice cracks in it that the fighter paid attention to. Like, oh, I should listen to you. And the fighter's like, yeah, I've got nothing better else to do. Please listen to me. So I love those fighters in those situations. But
Well, yeah, but then the fighter has to know everything about everybody else's abilities, and that's probably not going to be the case for most fighters.
Well, the fighter
That's
might
how
know.
most people play fighters.
So here's how it works out. And these are the best fighters that I've seen. Not everyone who plays fighters does this, of course, but I'm saying like a fighter leader. But the wizard and the cleric are there. They ultimately have the ability to veto the fighter's decision. But they're the ones who are like, oh, I intricately know my spells. But your fighter, you're like, hey, I see the environment. I see what's happening. I see what's going on. People, do this, because I don't understand your abilities as well as you do. There's no way. I'm not a nerd. But I do know what you
Except
can do.
you're playing D&D out of game.
The fighter is not a nerd. The player, though, wham.
No, but it is something that... It's different. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate on that, is that,
Oh, it's complicated.
It's complicated. For every person every person that just sits there for 5 minutes not knowing what to do, there are people that will sit there for a couple minutes trying to strategize. So, I mean, I can understand how it can be an issue, but at the same time, I can give some people the benefit of the doubt on that.
Yeah, and Kyle's pet peeves are going to be different than ours because we're players and he's a DM, so he probably doesn't really like waiting around for people, where it's like, well, we intimately know what that's like as magic casters.
Disrupting the flow, because I see what happens with other players. Like, I see the bigger picture of it, as well as something
Yeah,
else.
you're trying to keep everyone engaged. You're thinking about the group dynamics, whereas players don't have to worry about that. I mean, your role as a DM is way harder.
It's
because you have to be a manager, you have to be a leader, you have to worry about teamwork and all sorts of other stuff.
Balancing will create, like, it doesn't stop. But yeah, that's why also IT issues are one of my pet peeves. They're not that big of a pet peeve for everyone else. They're just like, oh, sometimes it
that's
happens.
a good one. Actually, I didn't even think about IT
No,
problems.
Oh my god.
It is. Especially where you guys are, and internet can be a potato, for lack of a better term.
It's actually really good now when it works, which is 60%.
Well, for
of the
now.
time.
You say
So
that
it
and it'll like
works.
you out tomorrow.
Yeah, which is why it works 60% of the time. But yeah, it's IT issues also interrupt the flow of things, and it's more of an issue since I'm a professional. I try to hold myself to a higher standard. It's also very frustrating just as a DM in general. I couldn't imagine it not being extremely frustrating. But the real last pet peeve that I have that I like to talk about is lack of communication.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, we're gonna play today. All right, 10 minutes. I've got Joe here. Where's Jim, Billy, and Becky? All right, Becky's here. Where's everyone else? 30 minutes later. Is it just us two? An hour later. Oh man, I completely forgot. Or lack of communication in D&D when there's just, I would say, more miscommunication in this instance, where it's the idea of like, all right, so you try to go into this room and you pull the lever. The player's just there, just listening. It's like, all right, so you pull the lever and the trap spring's like, whoa, I never pulled the lever. It's like, you said you were going in to activate it. And I said, yeah, I said activate it. I meant actually the painting on the side because I think it has a magical effect. It's like, So I've gotten to the point where I clarify everything beforehand, stating that you are going to do this, correct? And then the players say, yeah, and that takes away a lot of the miscommunication. But still, lack of communication or miscommunication is always such a pet peeve of mine because it could also spoil a big reveal or like, whoa, this wonderful thing. Like, actually, that is not at all what I intended. And it's,
I mean, on one hand, I can agree with the miscommunication in game, but out of game, I mean, granted, you should give somebody a heads up, but as somebody who has had in the past couple months and had to move to a completely different city.
Yeah, I was gonna say
this is funny.
you, Travis.
I didn't mean to shame you, but
No, but I've had to move to a completely different city, and my dog had a really bad health scare, and had to have multiple trips to the veterinarian to get checked out, and at one point,
it's okay.
Oh no, I'm just playing devil's advocate in this situation, because there are times where, for lack of a better term, shit happens. And
but send a text.
It does. It just shouldn't be extremely consistent to the point of becoming a pattern. Because once it's a pattern, it's like a different thing.
No, if it becomes a pattern, then it's an issue. But I mean, things can happen. So
in the past. So many people have had a pattern just like, hey, we're having a funeral for my grandpa. Oh, that's sad the first time it happens. The fifth time it happened, just like,
after the fifth.
It's like my students. You know, they'll email me with this stuff. It's like, how many grandparents do you possibly have still alive?
I mean, technically you should only have 4 at most.
At most.
5 if grandma and grandpa didn't get along, but you know. But realistically, it should only be 2 pairs of grandparents.
See, that's when you switch it up every time. From my grandparents' side to my dog died, can't have a number on that, to where my car broke down, to where I completely messed up on the time, to where my girlfriend is always on me, and I have to help her with this, mainly because I forgot to do it, but I have to help her with it. She's just real bit in pain right now. And then you go into, well, my parents need this, and then... yeah, it's
and so on and so forth. They'll give people ideas, Kyle.
No, I mean, and it can be an issue if it's it can be an issue if it's consistent. But as somebody who has had a history in the past couple of years with things coming up, things do happen, and it is better to communicate if you can. At least send a text or a Discord message or some sort of communication of some sort.
Yep.
Things can happen.
And to clarify, this is not for people who have stuff and they text you beforehand. Like, yeah, it happens. It can get a little ridiculous. But this is for the people who consistently half an hour in, 10, 20 minutes in, 5 minutes even after start time when everyone's driven there, or at least a few people have driven there and have said, oh, now I'm going to alert you. It's like, and this happens more for in-person games than it does online. Strangely enough, online has better attendance than in person.
Well, it's harder to come up with an excuse. Maybe.
True, but I mean, at the same time, you do still have those people showing up who, you know, they have a lot of hunting trips or dates with their girlfriends.
Right. I wonder who we're talking about.
Yeah.
No, we're not talking about anyone.
No, not at all.
But again,
you might
we're
be
told
watching
beforehand,
this podcast.
and
if you're told beforehand, that's fine. That's fine. If you're told beforehand, that's fine. I mean, this is a topic where there's a lot of nuance to it, but there's also a lot of simplicity to it. It's kind of both and not. It's
And
yes,
it's
no at the
personal
same
pet
time.
peeves. Not everyone's gonna have the same pet peeves.
One more clarification. This is more of a problem when it's in person. Online, I don't care as much, but strangely enough, people have it less of a problem online. But in person, if you do this, that is when it's bad. Online,
That's when it's really bad.
Yeah, but
No, I can get that.
I don't care.
Well, it is bad. It is bad no matter what. But if you go to the trouble of doing a whole in-person setup and then half of your party doesn't show up, that's like super addictive.
Especially when it's a 20-30 minute drive.
It's awful when it's in person. Well, just don't drop the ball, people. Anyway, we should move on to another pet peeve because we've been talking about this one for like 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, Sherry, you were up next anyway, because I think, Kyle, that was your last big one.
Yeah, that was my last one. Like, we've covered a few of them. One was
Sherry.
We covered, so.
I just have so many. It's really hard to...
No, Sherry, you go on. I mean, admittedly, my presence here is now playing devil's advocate in this situation. So,
okay, great. I love that.
I mean, unless you bring up, like, something like, I don't know, like, harassment or some sort like there's no devil's advocate.
I'm not gonna bring that up. That's like
hey, what if we work at Blizzard?
Okay,
well, this is not Blizzard, people.
I know.
I can promise you, this is not Blizzard.
But no, you go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'll just start with the big one: metagaming. I don't like it when people overly metagame. I know to some extent it's inevitable because we have out-of-game knowledge, and we're trying to play characters that don't have that knowledge. But when you blatantly metagame to the point where it is now messing up the game, it's not okay. I just don't do that. Why do people feel the need to do that? Seriously.
Well, judging by Kyle's Stevie Wonderhead,
yes, he has an opinion.
I'm pretty sure he's going to be the one playing.
Yeah, I'm playing devil's advocate here. All right.
Okay,
so,
you go ahead, Kyle.
Another pet peeve: Kyle plays devil's advocate.
Metagaming with a published adventure module, I 100% agree, can be a problem if someone has gone to the point of reading it and then they start to metagame with that. That is some BS stuff right there. But if you're doing like a homebrew or no one's read the adventure module and you guys are going through it and you're still trying to metagame, more so I find that it's players trying to rationalize and figure things out rather than do a worthwhile metagame. It's just you being passionate about the system. And a DM, at least a good DM, again, a lot of the times we're flying by the seat of our pants, especially with the less experience we have, but a good DM should make it to where, yeah, you can try to metagame. It's cute. Have fun. Oh, wait, that's actually a good idea. I might steal that. But yeah, that's fun. Have fun trying to think of that. And then at that point, you can metagame as much as you want to try to rationalize what's happening, to see where the plot's going, to figure things out. But you don't have any real information to gain massive information that your characters would not. We're not having a show where it's a cutscene, at least most CMs don't do this, where it's a cutscene to what the villain is thinking, and then you as players are not expected to act upon this knowledge. Like, why would you do that as a DM? Unless they're professional actors or something, why would you give them this information? You should only be able to act upon all the information that you have. And I don't think metagaming is as big of an issue as
well, it sounds like you've had to put things into your game to work around it. It's so much of an issue.
No, it's just that I don't allow it to be an issue by adding extra elements that could be metagamed. I think actually it'd be better if you specify a bit more on your metagaming experience, because I think that might clear things up.
Well, I mean, the knowledge of the world now impacts what your knowledge of the real world impacts now what your character knows, or maybe you use knowledge of another class in what your character would know. Or something like that. So something that your character would just not know about D&D or the real world, that now suddenly they know. It's like, don't do that. Like, you're trying to play a character, not yourself.
Yeah,
it's my pet peeve, Kyle. It's not wrong.
No, I
it's an opinion.
I can see Sherry's side of it, though.
I can. I think I've actually written an article about this as well. But
Well, of course you have. You've written an article about everything.
yes, like over 200 of them.
You have way too many articles coming.
Metagaming at that point, so this is where it gets a little bit difficult, because of course you want to play a character and you want to only have as much as they know, but again, as a person, you want to apply as much knowledge as you can to the world. So there's a difference between understanding like, hey, trolls are weak to fire, maybe we should burn trolls with fire, and the DM could just say, oh yeah, that's an obvious one that everyone knows in the world. But if you know that specifically Rickshaw J is in charge of the Thieves organization, you know what his exact weakness and background is because you were with him in a previous campaign, well, then
that's metagaming too. They're both metagaming. I don't think everyone in the world would know that trolls are weak to fire.
It's a common adventure. You can justify it as like a common adventuring knowledge that people have that.
It's not common to be an adventurer, and if you're like a level, I don't know, 3 or 5 adventurer, you probably, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you probably never even encountered a troll. Like, what level are they?
True, but that's why I'd say that there's
after you fight one and you happen to burn them with fire.
Yeah, it also depends on the.
But
it depends on the class too.
Well, you gotta also look at it at the other side too. Like, let's say you go along with this route, and you don't know it's weak to fire, but really you do know it's weak to fire. So then you go through this song and dance of like, oh, well, if I use fire, am I using it intentionally or am I metagaming? Oh, and then you try to go through this whole thing. And it's just awkward, weird, and it actually doesn't feel good to be authentic in that manner. It's hard to figure out, but I'd say one thing.
With everything, there's a line. Generally speaking,
there is.
If it's going to be a pet peeve of mine, it needs to be pretty blatant.
True, and
I know you wouldn't know that in game. What are you doing?
True, and I've gotten around that I think by mainly involving checks, like using the history skill check. Oh, I know.
Is that even in 5e?
Yeah.
Is it? I don't think it is.
Yes, history is a skill check.
History is a skill check.
I don't even know.
Exactly. People don't even know it's a skill check, and I try to make use of some skills like that. For example, oh, do you know that's there? What about the history of the area? Make a roll, and then that's an easy way to set the line of like, you do or you don't. Forget it or keep with that information, rather than this little tiptoeing around like, oh, is it?
Yeah, like you can say like, I want to roll to see if I would know this. But to just assume that you're going to know some obtuse piece of D&D knowledge.
Yeah, that's...
If you're not a really intelligent character or something, it's just, it's not believable.
No, I can definitely see that.
And there's definitely levels of it, for sure.
There is levels of it. I mean, some person's metagaming might not be equivalent to some other person's metagaming. But yeah. But I can definitely see Sherry's side of it, how, like, it can be an issue, but I think, like Kyle said, using the history check can be very helpful because it can help prevent that sort of thing from happening. Though, I will say, it's like, if somebody's like a ranger and they come from a place that's full of trolls, then, it's like, oh, well, I fought them as a child, I know they're weak to fire. That's one thing, but you also have, that's going into, like, creating somebody's backstory.
And it better actually be in your backstory, too, and you didn't just make that up on the spot.
I actually had a player who did this, where it's like, yes, it's my backstory. I lived in the woods, and I fought and heard about almost every kind of monster. And that's how they justified their Medicaid knowledge. Like, okay, now...
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Be realistic, people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's it's just different levels of it. That's for sure.
No, it is different levels.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
Yeah.
Oh, my next pet peeve. Okay, when you have those players who just for the life of them cannot work well with anybody, and they actively work against the party.
Yeah.
It's just what my character would do.
Yeah, like my character would try to steal from my party members, or even try to kill them, or just really try to screw them over big time.
I mean, unless that's literally written into the DNA of your character, I mean,
it's not...
No.
Well,
I'm just saying, Travis.
Well, ultimately, I did always fail those checks when I tried to steal money from the group, and I already told Kyle ahead of time that I had a tick where if I was lying, he would be able to tell that I was lying about something. So, I mean, and it's different. I mean, granted, recently with Alice, Kyle, we had a boss fight where I had to go into like the ether realm, and I had to punch out this glass, which beat the boss. But I got some sort of bad thing happening to me because of it. He happened to roll a 100 on it, which says that, oh, well, now you're possessed and you need to kill everybody until you're either dead or you get healed. Or
And
like
you
you
screwed
get...
over another campaign
that's
with
a
that
conundrum.
decision too.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is something that I mean, if somebody's actively doing it just to be a dick, that's one thing. But there are instances in-game where you kind of get stuck with your whole purpose now is to kill the rest of the party. Oh.
Yeah, that's at least going to
okay.
be like built into the plot and everything.
That's built into the plot.
There's
but
a
if you're
difference
just doing
between
it to...
plot, for one, plot by the DM. Second, being a little bit of annoyance, like, Jimmy, he's gonna steal from us, isn't he? Check your pocket. Jimmy?
Yeah,
What?
like,
Why would you
it could just
suspect
be
me?
Cute.
That'd be like the second one. I'm just like, no small misdemeanors and everything. And the third is actively working against your party or not caring about them because you want to use it as an excuse to be just a horrible person. Well, that's what my character would do. It's just like, oh, I'm just... it's just who they are. It's just like, no, that is a completely different situation. Where
it's somebody not understanding. Well, it's not somebody understanding chaotic, because there's a lot of nuance in chaotic. Chaotic doesn't just mean I'm going to be evil and or an asshole the entire time. There's nuance to it.
Yeah, it's someone trying to shield themselves, pretend they're the victim, whatever else. Do whatever they need so that they can justify their atrocious behavior.
Yeah, and more often than not, it ends up blowing up in their face, and then you just don't want to play with that player anymore. But I can't even play devil's advocate on that one. That's
not a pet peeve. That's just like a red flag, a bad player in general.
That's just a bad player.
Red flags, like.
Well, that's why we kind of combined this episode, because one person's pet peeve might be somebody else's red flag, and I mean, that is a absolute definition.
Well, and how to introduce people in D&D, like it's a whole package.
Yeah, it's a whole package. But do you have any other pet peeves?
Let's go down to the list, Sherry.
Honestly, my other pet peeves just have to do with people not understanding how to play certain alignments. So, like, they really stereotype the alignments.
So like what we were just talking about is people who just kind of generalize the alignments and
like I'm chaotic, so I have to like steal from my party members or something like that. I just have to be an asshole.
Dick, and I'm lawful good stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm so lawful, it's almost to the point of idiocy.
No, when you stereotype things and just because I had to actually really look into the alignments when I started playing D&D again, and for the longest time, as kind of as a layman, I had thought that somebody who was chaotic, there was just, you're evil or you're an asshole. There's no in between. Well, there is a in between, but there's not really an in between. But as a layman, that's what I had thought. It wasn't until I actually got the books and I started really researching that there is a lot of nuance there, and that, I mean, you get a lot of the lawful good stupid, but at the same time, I really think chaotic is the most abused in terms of alignment.
It is. We could actually hold pretty much an entire episode on alignment, because some people...
And we might end up doing it, so...
We probably should. It's been a controversial topic.
Also say that alignment is not good in D&D, and we should get rid of alignment, and I think that is a short-sighted and...
very.
Just a terrible decision, because it adds so much to it when you use alignment as a guide rather than a law.
Like, and that's what you have to remember. Like, these are all tools to help you build your character, but they're guidelines. It's not like being neutral means that you never have any opinions or never speak up. Like you're still building a person.
Those damn neutrals.
It's just
it is
off of.
No, it is a thing, and I really think we really genuinely could do an entire episode on alignment, because it is a very controversial topic that we could spend another hour talking about, but I mean, we've already been doing this for about an hour, so I mean, we can put a pin in that for now, but I really do think abusing alignment is something that it's not right, and it is a massive pet peeve, red flag, however you want to look at it. It is an issue because people, no matter how experienced they are, I mean, there may be people who have been playing D&D for 15 years, and they just use alignment as an excuse to be a dick about things.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you have new players who don't know. And, there's a difference between not knowing and not caring. And just kind of doing whatever it is and just going, like Kyle said, my least favorite sentence in D&D, that's just what my character would do.
Right.
It's, you can't just throw everything on your character saying, oh, my character would do that because that. Well, if you don't establish that in the backstory and you don't establish some sort of, a common place to start with, if you don't establish your character, you don't establish their behaviors and their ideals and their beliefs, then you can't just start throwing stuff in midway through just so it can fit whatever agenda that you're having.
It's not my fault I'm a dick. It's just...
Yeah, no, it's just my alignment,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A dick alignment. I haven't heard of that before.
No,
Like
it is.
Neutral is I don't want to roleplay alignment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I would say it would be neutral.
No,
It would be I don't want to roleplay.
Neutral requires them to actually weigh their decisions and have a equilibrium between the good, bad, lawful, and chaotic. Chaotic neutral is the excused one if I don't care, but in reality, it's the what I actually am as a player in DM, which is completely insane. So.
Yeah, no, chaotic neutral to me is just I'm an asshole. I'm out for myself. I don't care about anybody else. And neutral is like I don't really want to make any decisions. I'm gonna let the group do it, and I'll just go with the flow.
That is neutral. Mostly, you are correct. Chaotic neutral, though, has been used as a.
It's been abused, but once again, that is a topic. Yeah. That's a topic for another.
We will chat
episode.
about this another time, guys.
Yeah, because there's literally an hour's worth of content, which is a lot.
Oh, at least, yes, absolutely.
At least. So.
But yeah, stereotyping, alignment, and then also just stereotyping classes drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Where you have the really stereotypical backstory depending on what your class is. So if you're a bard, you're all about seduction or something stupid. And all you want to do on people.
Yeah, and if you're a rogue, how many parents have died?
Yeah, exactly. Or if you're a barbarian, you have to have the intelligence of a rock.
Yeah.
You're just the dumbest person in the party. Like, come on. You don't have to be that dumb.
Min-maxer, like.
Yeah. No, they're stereo. I mean, like I said, that is an entire episode for another time. But I think we're already an hour-ish into this, and I think we have covered quite a bit here. I think for a lot of newer players that there is a way to get into D&D, and as long as your expectations are tempered to an extent, if you know that you're getting into something, that just have fun with it, and don't run into players that are going to be problematic. And if you do notice people that are being problematic, talk to the DM. If the DM is problematic, well, there's a lot of people who are professional DMs, and you can find another DM who won't be sexist, misogynistic, or generally an asshole. There's a lot of places out there now.
Well, I mean, we're all a little bit of an asshole. To be a DM, you have to be a little
Well, yes, but at the same time, you'd see a lot of people talk about not being comfortable playing D&D.
Yeah. I'm just giving them shit and stuff. I completely agree.
I know, but there are a lot of outlets now, thanks to, and this is weird to say thanks to the pandemic, but there is a lot of outlets now where you can find people to play D&D with online, and you can find people to play the game with, and you can be a new player and find people and hire somebody with 20 years of experience or 30 years of experience, 15. You can hire somebody who knows that. You can get into a group and you can make friends and you can play the game. And
if you don't have money, you just want to go at it, I don't necessarily advise this, but you can go onto Reddit into the LFG section and find a group very quickly. Again, there is no guarantee who you'll get. So there's a reason why there's paid versus not paid. You might get Joey the Slime Ball as your DM, but it's...
Oh my gosh!
I mean, And you might, but at the same time, there are a lot of outlets now. So where you can, if you are interested in trying out D&D, there's a lot of outlets now where you can do it. And it's not as scary as it was 30, 40 years ago. There's a lot more opportunities now to do something and play it. And as long as you go in knowing how to spot these things, spot these red flags, spot these things that can ultimately be pet peeves, as long as you kind of know what you're looking for, then I think ultimately you'll have fun. Because D&D is a game that's supposed to be fun, and if you put the time and effort into it, it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and for the new players out there who are trying D&D for the first time, just remember that if you don't have a great time your first time because your group is terrible, try a different group.
Yes.
And yeah, like, don't give up just because you're with a crappy group the first time.
Always take the opportunities to find a way to play if you can, because ultimately it may take time, it may take a long time, but you will find a group that you enjoy playing with if it is something you genuinely want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with that, I think this is a good place to stop this episode with that little bit of an outro there. And until then, hopefully all of you can find us all of our social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, all the Level Up Corner. Make sure to check out the website, levelupcorner.com. You can check out the VODs on twitch.tv /Level Up Corner, or you can hire Kyle. He has ways for you to hire him. And but without further ado, then we will see you. Yep. And we will see you all next time on the Level Up Corner podcast. Thank you.
Bye.
Until then.
Keep rolling.